All right, good morning, everybody. I see, hey, Pitt Danny with First Blood, and I see Uncle Steve there. Good morning, y'all. I'm about to, yeah, we're gonna talk about this vote yesterday. House passes a bill requiring voters to prove citizenship in federal elections. That's, uh, that's kind of a no-brainer, one would think. Let's go. All right, right off the rip this morning, guys, I'm going to beg a little patience of you. Uh, noticed, hopefully that helps. It is hard to adjust a microphone through a studio monitor solo. That's why bigger shows have sound engineers. Okay, so yeah, I'm gonna ask you to extend me a little patience and indulgence on this because I went back to rewatch some of the recent episodes, just doing a little housekeeping, and noticed the sound needs some work. So y'all bear with me while I'm trying to get that dialed in. But let's see. I think. Let me know how that sounds. I mean, that you can hear me is one thing. I obviously that's important, but I want you to hear me clearly and to have good quality audio. So I'm probably gonna have to do a little bit of extra work to get that dialed in. It may even be time to replace this microphone. Anyway, let's talk about what just happened. So the House passed a bill requiring voters prove citizenship in federal elections. Right off the rip, before we even get into the rest of this, y'all, Biden has already said it's dead on arrival, right? If in the off chance it makes it to Biden's desk, Joe Biden has already stated plainly that he will veto this bill. I'm going to remind you what it does is this. It requires that in order to vote in a federal election in the United States, one must present proof of citizenship. If you guys have been, if you haven't been following the news on this, there is a major scandal going on right now where uh, many places are having it reported that in God, I wish I knew more about it so that I could talk about it in more detail, but it's not the point of the show today. But there's a major scandal going on through the voters registration help group, etc. Pitt Danny says it is already law. I'll get back to that in just a second. But all across the country right now, and most especially in places where it's not the safest Democrat voting district, there have been uh, fails on verification checks to the tune of thousands of new voter registrations per week in some of these places, which do not match the Social Security matching and verification process, which is to say that thousands in a week, in more than 1 week. We're talking about a shitload of people at the same time that we've got just an unprecedented record number of hostile foreign agents flooding across the border, hostile foreign invaders flooding across the border. Basically, people are attempting to register, and in many cases getting away with it, registering to vote illegally in the United States. At the same time, yep, Sergeant Major mentions Tammany Hall. If you've never seen the film Gangs of New York, they're in the midst of an election, and you know they crack the joke. You see the Irish guy coming out, who's clearly not a U.S. citizen, coming out of the polling place, and they ask him, "Hey, did you vote?" He says, "I did my duty. I voted Tammany." And they said, "Just once? You call that doing your civic duty?" Right? And he's got long hair and a beard, and they run him into the barber's office, and they shave off just his beard and send him back in to vote again. And then on the way out, they grab him and they shave off his mustache, and then they shave his head. And every time they cut off a little more hair, and they send him back to vote 4, 5, 6 times. Right? Well, I mean, got some rough looking hombres coming across the border. I'm sure you could shave them 2 or 3 times and send them back in. And when you've got a situation where you've got multiple thousands of fraudulent registrations, all you got to do is give them, right? You're not even giving them a new ID. You're just giving them a new name. And they just go in and say, "Hey, my name is so-and-so." Well, without voter ID, how do we know? We saw this happen to the tune of thousands in 2020. People would show up to vote in person. And guys, oh my God, I despise early voting and mail-in voting. I do. The correct thing would be to have you show up in person one day only, go vote. No national holiday bullshit. Today is the day you vote. Oh, you have a job? Be an adult, and just like making yourself a doctor's appointment or a dentist appointment, you schedule it ahead of time, you plan for it, and you take care of your business. Because if you can't do that, you're not old enough to vote. I don't care if you're 65 years old. If you cannot fit an adult responsibility, like getting your oil changed or getting your prostate checked, if you can't fit that into your work schedule, you are not a fucking adult. It's not complicated. It's really not. And on the other side of that, I will say this: if you have a boss, a manager, etc., that refuses to let you, assuming you're, hey, month in advance, I'm taking time off, or hey, I'm gonna go, I'll be back, I'm gonna go vote during my lunch hour, or hey, I'm gonna come in an hour, I need to come in an hour late or leave an hour early tomorrow to go vote, etc., etc. and you've got a boss that won't work with you, then yes, okay, I understand that's a problem. And the correct solution to that problem is that you should examine that boss's political affiliation. Ask yourself the question, does he understand what yours is? Look at your coworkers and see if any of them are on the other side of that. Well played, Sergeant Major. You are correct. Fit that in, and prostate check should not be in the same sentence. And you are welcome. But yeah, if the boss is letting somebody else go and he's not letting you go, you know what? File a lawsuit for election interference. But in all seriousness, I'll tell you the truth. It wasn't until just a few years ago that I realized that you can vote without an ID. I live in Georgia. I've always been asked for my ID when I go vote. I've always been asked to show a driver's license and to fill out a document, and then they check the driver's license against the system to make sure that you haven't already voted, right? And we had instances. I started to say it, and then I got distracted by the Tammany Hall comment. There were several thousand instances of people reporting in 2020 that they showed up to vote in person, and were told at that time, "Oh no, you've already voted. You'll have to vote on a provisional ballot." You'll have to vote on a provisional ballot. I'll tell you something about provisional ballots. They get counted last. And depending on how the non-provisional ballot count goes, they may not be counted at all. Funny story, many of you might know this. You might not know that. In fact, actually, no. A few of you, like Pitt Danny, you probably know this. Many of you may not know this. I don't know how many of you in the chat have actually worked as poll observers. I've never been a poll worker, but I have worked as an observer for the party, working with Republican lawyers, specifically after the 2020 election. But not all the votes get counted in any election. They start counting, and if at some point it becomes clear that there is a low probability that to continue to count will change the winner, then they just stop counting. They just give up. I'm not just talking about ignoring the provisional ballots, right? I mean, and there's a lot of room there for that to be abused. I'm not saying that's what happened in 2020. I mean, let's be real. We saw a lot of shady shit happen in 2020, just stopping the vote early in the way or stopping the count early in the way that it's often done was the least of our concerns in 2020. Broken fucking water main, my ass. Fit that one in, because the Democrats managed to. So obviously, the SAVE Act, in theory, should be a good thing. Now, Pitt Danny says it is already law. It is already law that only citizens can vote in federal elections. The proof of citizenship thing is a little touchier, a little trickier. And I want to take you back to 2020 for just a minute. Remember, 2020 was also a census